Okay, here we go. We are live. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Chrissy Mayer podcast. This is early morning edition. Very exciting. um, if you're listening to us on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, or SoundCloud, please go and leave a 5-star review. I very much appreciate all the reviews that you guys have left so far. And really quick announcement today, Friday, I will be performing with the Comedians of the Compound in Bethel, PA at the Pat Garrett Amphitheater. There are still tickets available for that show, although I know it's selling pretty quickly. So go to my website, chrissymayer.com, for details and tickets, and future dates are listed there as well. I'm going to be there's another Comedians of the Compound show July 17th at Uncle Vinny's. That's out in Point Pleasant Beach in New Jersey, kind of near the Jersey Shore. And then July 20th, I'll be at Jinx on the Boardwalk, which is kind of in the same area out there in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey. Then I'll be in New Orleans August 13th and 14th, Vegas September 10th and 11th with Comedians of the Compound, and then I'll be back in Dallas, Texas, headlining Hyenas on September 17th and 18th. So I would love to see you guys at some of those stand-up shows because we like to loll. Quick shout out to our sponsor, Cushy Dreams. They are my one-stop place to go for all things CBD, guys. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling like you need something to calm you down, but you don't want to get super high or super, I was on Adderall for a while. I feel like that did the opposite of calm me down, but I love Cushy Dreams. They've helped me kind of deal with my anxiety over the past year or so. It's premium smokable CBD. It comes in hemp flower, which is the bud here, and also pre-roll CBD joints, which I really like. Looks, smells, feels like marijuana, but it's not going to get you high. You can enjoy all the health benefits of CBD without going out to lunch. There's under 0.3% THC, and it's cannabis that ships directly to you. It's legal in all 50 states. Join the men and women who are sick of vapes and gummies and want to smoke their CBD. It's 100% hand trimmed, never machine trimmed. They do tons of lab tests to show compliance and purity, all of which can be found on their website, cushydreams.com, Kushy dreams.com. Cushy Dreams has CBD flower and pre-rolls in specific indica sativa blends like energy, hustle, relax, create, dream. So if you want to be a little bit more up or a little bit more down, you can pick a strain that's right for you. Maybe if you're somebody that needs it before bed, you'd pick like a dream or a relax. So go to cushydreams.com and use promo code CMP to get 20% off every order. Put the CMP in at checkout, and I think you also get free shipping as well. Okay, guys, so exciting. I'm excited to have this guy here today. He is an investigative journalist. I think he lived in DC for a time. I don't know if he's still living there, but we're going to find out. Guys, it's Jordan Schachtel. Woo!
Hey, I did live in DC for 6 years. I'm actually in Jersey right now, but I live in West Palm Beach for the time being. It's good times. Yeah.
I was just in there. I was just in Florida.
Yeah, you mentioned Point Pleasant. I grew up like going down there every summer. Such good times. People should go to your show. It's an awesome city, and now that like things are kind of like open and stuff, it's a great time. The boardwalk is like amazing.
I did not realize. See, I grew up on Long Island, and a lot of us don't ever venture out to Jersey because like Long Island has so many beaches. But I didn't realize how freaking expensive like hotels are in the Jersey Shore area. And I also I know it's like a whole like, Jersey. I mean, Long Island has trash culture as well, but there are there are slight differences with Jersey, but it is fun. I do like it out there.
And likewise, we never went out to Long Island either. Like maybe 1 or 2 times in my life have I ever gone out that way. So it's the same. It's a reciprocal relationship, I guess.
And we feel the same. Yeah, Long Island is weirdly, I think it's insular in a different way that like Long Island people are less likely to leave at all. Like I've noticed that. Like I kind of moved out away. I lived in Brooklyn, I lived in Queens, lived in Westchester. So, but I feel like Long Island people, if any of their family are still out there, they're like, we're never leaving. They just don't. They're ride or die. So Jordan, hello. You caught my attention. I started following you on Twitter a while back, and I was really impressed with how you covered and kind of broke down and brought attention to Fauci's emails, which came out. There was a Freedom of Information Act. I think now, I mean, this almost seems like old news, but only because no mainstream media outlets truly have been like covering them. Like Fox was covering them for a little bit, but I have heard like not very many peeps since. And I actually want to know about your background first before we get into that, how you sort of like came to be an investigative journalist.
Yeah, so it was kind of a weird road. So like my background's in international affairs, national security. I went to undergrad and grad school for international affairs. I was just kind of like writing some papers on niche topics in grad school, and one of my professors was like, "Hey, you should go write some stuff for my publication," which at the time was Breitbart News. So,
Oh yeah, I've heard.
yeah, so I was kind of like a national security reporter there for a while. I originally wanted to basically like be a Fed, go to school for like
Cool.
national security stuff, and then I just kind of got sucked into this like journalism world and like semi-advocacy conservative media. But yeah, so like with the pandemic stuff, it's like kind of related because pandemics are definitely like an international issue, and I started kind of realizing like how crazy this stuff was like way early on because I was always like a fan of like zombie pandemic movies and stuff like that. So I started like reading about like when this like pandemic started, like what actually like the CDC and the WHO are supposed to do during a pandemic, like what are they supposed to recommend to people? And what I was reading like from their pandemic guidance, just like out of interest, was like didn't make sense. Like it didn't make sense compared to like what they were doing at the time, like with the lockdowns and stuff. So that's like when I got my initial skepticism. And then I actually had COVID in like March of 2020, a long time ago. And I remember like the fear that I felt because like everyone on the TV was telling me that I was going to die, basically. And I was like, oh, this is like, it was like a cold for me. So it just like dramatically underperformed. But I remember like the fear element, like early on, like my friends had like a buffet because some of my DC friends just like weren't really like tuned in with the news and whatever, like didn't really care about COVID. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I was like kind of like freaked out. And then I got COVID and I was like, okay, this is like, isn't being represented correctly in the media. And then Fauci, of course, became like the chief spokesman for the panic mongers and all these like corrupt, like pharma people. So that's kind of where I got started on that road. It was like the transition just from like some like healthy amount of interest into the topic into like nothing makes sense. And then ever since then, I've just been like tracking the craziness.
Yeah, and you had some like I always love like watching someone's Twitter because that helps me gauge like what they're interested in. And I was like, oh yeah, I feel like not enough is being talked about in terms of like, yes, we all know the lockdowns happened, but like who they really benefited and who they really screwed over. And I just think people are like, well, better safe than sorry. And it's like, oh no, like look at who became even richer during all this.
Yeah. There's like 40 new billionaires directly related to the the COVID testing or vaccines and PPE industry. It's all just like one giant shit show, and it's so I've been in New Jersey and New York this week, and people are so like utterly propagandized by the stupidity, like with the, we have like whole cultures being created around masks and politeness, and just like, it's just like so insane. It's just hard to even like, it's much more chill in Florida, but even there's still people in Florida who are just like totally propagandized by the stupidity. And it's just like, it's sad to see that, like, I never realized how easily people could be manipulated by like the corporate press and by these like government employees who, as someone lived in DC, like have never been particularly impressed with government employees. So like it's just like I'm just doing my best to try to like unravel this and get people to realize like that they've just like been taken for the longest ride of their life, basically.
And you lived in DC, which I've been a couple times to cover different rallies, and my sense was like, oh God, it's cold here. It just feels like gloomy. It feels like soulless. And you actually worked there for 6 years. What was your experience there? And when did you first start realizing like, oh yeah, government employees like are not this like they're not like know-it-all beings. They're not like better than everybody else.
Yeah, it's an interesting town. There's like corruption is kind of the norm, and there's just a lot of people that aspire to do big things in Washington D.C. and it's a very like credentialized town. So it's not so much about it's a lot about like who you know, what credentials you have, and then there's just like this cycle of corruption with the lobbying, and my time in DC, like I have a lot of good friends in DC, and I had good times in DC, and it's a really interesting city. But the like the ruling regime in DC is very corrupt, and it became very susceptible to this COVID stuff. There was no real pushback in Congress whatsoever. GOP down the same nonsense they were pushing, and you continue to see that stuff. There's really very few legitimately independent voices in Washington, D.C., because to be an independent voice in D.C., it doesn't really make sense. Like, you can accumulate a big social media following wherever in the world you want. But in D.C., like, you need to like play the game in order to move your way up. Like if you're like an awesome congressman like Thomas Massey or something, you don't really have any power. Like as much as like great things he's doing for like raising awareness about a lot of good issues, there's a way to get to the top, and it's through that corrupt format. So you either embrace the corrupt format or you try to do something else and work outside the system.
It almost sounds like kind of hopeless. It sounds like, well, is there any hope of any of us to like new folks running for office, or like, is this a hopeless system?
Yeah, so I don't even necessarily think like I think like the best way to beat the system is to just like move the power centers outside of the system. And I think you're seeing a lot of this with like the corporate press. Like fewer and fewer people are tuning into these programs, and the corruption is definitely on both sides. Like a lot of people just refer to the corporate press on the right as like CNN, MSNBC, but like the Wall Street Journal is an absolutely like insanely corrupt institution, in my opinion. Like,
Oh wow, yeah, nobody talks about
COVID,
that.
like with the COVID stuff, they're basically like running up free promos. Well, not free promos for big pharma. Their opinion section and their news section is like it's basically like the news section is basically journalists that want to work for the New York Times. And the opinion section is like former FDA appointees and like all these people that are directly connected to big pharma. And with these corporate interests, I just think that like they really have no autonomy. But it's so great, seeing like people like you have a growing podcast, and there's so many like interesting independent voices now that can kind of like push back against these narratives that are really just being funded by these giant pharmaceutical institutions with the COVID stuff. But there's like insane corruption with the corporate press, and I don't think that there's like any like reforming that, similar to reforming politics from inside the system. Like it definitely has to happen outside of it.
Okay, so yeah, so it seems like the answer to the legacy news media is like, right, these independent podcasts. Like I always use like Tim Pool as like a prime example, just
Yeah.
because so many people know of him. And then sometimes I think like, oh God, like what good am I even doing? Like I just have conversations with people, and I don't know, am I even going to reach the folks that are already kind of like set in their ways, and they're going to feel how they feel about all the things we can't talk about on YouTube. But so yeah, I'm just like, all right, well, I guess I can have conversations with people, and if someone's on the fence and they listen, nobody wants to be told that they're wrong, or that they're brainwashed, or that they've had their head in the sand for a year. And so it's like, but everyone likes to feel like they're right and they're justified.
Yeah, they kind of have to like come to you in the end, right? Like it's tough to just like yell at people and tell them that they're wrong. But yeah. But yeah, like you got Tim Pool, you got Joe Rogan, you got like all these people that aren't necessarily like politically aligned in one way. They're just kind of independent voices that are seeking truths and aren't like some people, there's some boundaries, like, Rogan entered that big Spotify deal. So like, there's some things that he can't do, but there's still like a lot of, there's so many interesting voices that don't have to answer to bosses who have, like $2 billion in stock in some company that you can't critique and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see, this new media environment. And I think that's why like all of these, social media giants, in addition to these like corporate press institutions, that's why they want to censor people, is like, especially CNN, like they're like so terrified of losing their market share. So, you have a guy like Brian Stelter that goes on, he's like, advocating for the state to shut down like Tim Pool and these other people
Oh
because
my
they're saying
God.
something on a
Did he
4-hour
really say
podcast.
that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like they bring it. They don't directly say. They talk about it in terms of like, have you heard of these like disinformation reporters? Everything is like
Oh
so
God.
Orwellian that they're
Yeah. Oh,
basically
the
just like
fact
smearing.
checkers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or the fact checkers, even worse. Yeah, the fact checkers are just like, it's such a ridiculous institution because like, if you're fact checking, you can just it's just so easy to spin it and then to independently choose like which fact do you want to check in someone's 4-hour YouTube monologue. So yeah,
It's like,
it's a crazy world, but I think that's a reason at least to be optimistic. And as long as like these oligarchs don't collude and like shut us all down, I think we'll succeed in spreading awareness about real issues that people care about.
so if we are successful, which I hope we are too, in spreading awareness, like what comes after that?
So like, because everyone has access to like a microphone and a camera, it's hard to see how this is exactly going to play out. But in terms of like cable news, I think it's just like a slowly dying industry, and that's great. And the way to push back against that, really, there's only really one option, and that's to get like, completely connected to the state, like what you're seeing in China. Basically, you have just like these state-funded institutions, and what they do is they just completely censor social media to the point where like you can't even log into a Western social media outlet. So like, I think that's sadly the way that like those industries are going to go. Like they're just going to try to use state power to shut everyone down because that's their only play left. But
Wow.
at least we have like a constitutional system, so it'd be tougher to do what China's doing and just be like, all right, we're going to pull the plug on everything, and like, you guys are agents for disinformation and yada yada. But with the COVID stuff, they've gotten away with an enormous amount of things. So who knows? But I think that's really their only play at this point.
Do you feel like patriots are making a dent? When you see like parents like I think Tatiana Ibrahim, she's been like very vocal. She's out kind of up here in the Carmel school districts, like very vocal against CRT. And I'm seeing more and more parents standing up as well. I would like to think that stuff makes a difference, but yeah, but it's like, what is separating us from basically becoming like China? Like, is it? And then I'm like, okay, is the Constitution like actually hold as much weight as it should?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is like there's so many extra constitutional activity that's like going on in the United States right now. Like, of course, you have like the January 6th protesters, and a lot of them are, or even like the rioters, and like even the people that did the worst things are sitting in like solitary confinement for, even like, let's say like the accusations against some of these people are true, like that they like, got into a scuffle with a couple police officers, that still doesn't deserve like solitary confinement and no representation and not being able to like call your family for weeks at a time. Like, it's just kind of insane what's going on now. So you're right. Like it seems like the Constitution has somehow just been disregarded in people's like human rights. And I think the COVID stuff was a great enabler of the like unlawful regime that's kind of propped up in Washington, D.C. Since I'm since I'm probably on like a YouTube live stream now, I can't like completely elaborate on the administration, because like they're great with the censorship stuff. So yeah, it's just very interesting to see what's happening in this country, and a lot of it, there's really no basis for it in our history, and there's like no legal reason for why I think like, they're just treating these January 6th people like political detainees, essentially. My friend Julie Kelly at American Greatness, I don't know if you follow her, but she's been doing like amazing reporting on
What's
what's
her
going
name?
on there.
Julie.
Julie Kelly.
Okay.
And you can find her column at American Greatness. And she talks, she has a lot of good sources within like these like, Guantanamo like detention camps that they're putting these people in. And not a lot of Americans know like how bad it is. And it seems to be like incredibly ruthless, like the conditions that they're putting these people in for the act of protesting and trespassing, essentially. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I feel like it, like I was there at Jan 6 and like I wasn't like inside, but just from what I saw and the whole day and how like chill it was for the most part, and how the media has shaped it to be, it's like it just was such a trap. It's like we just like really stepped in it, and they're just going to use it forever and ever. And it's like it's crazy making stuff, because you're like, okay, this was like maybe one of the protests we saw last summer. Like maybe it's equal to one, like, or it was like just as bad as one. It's like, I mean, fewer people died for sure. Just one unarmed woman was shot. And it's like even yesterday, like in Twitter trending, I'm like, we're still talking about Jan 6.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Like
it's purposeful because it helps them enact their agenda. That's why, like, the Democrats in Congress and even Republicans, sadly, are like obsessed with January 6th. And you're right, like these like Antifa BLM riots the entirety of last summer, where you had like entire city blocks on fire. Sadly, like people were killed in the mayhem. And then you had this one protest that got out of hand on January 6th. And like, yes, that the Capitol is like an important building in Washington, D.C., but like these narratives around like what actually happened is so ridiculous, like that they were going to like overthrow the government, and they were going to like hold the country hostile, and not a single person had like a handgun on them. Like, how are you going to attempt to do that? And like these videos that are coming out, half of the, on one side, apparently the Capitol police officers were like letting everyone in. So, okay, like I guess you can still charge them with trespassing, but it's like so ridiculous. There's no greater separation between like what the corporate press is trying to tell you it is and what actually happened. And, like I'm never excusing like violence of any sort, but it is so like overblown at this point that it's just like insane. Like and it's sad because like if you talk to like some of my liberal friends in DC, they're like, oh my God, January 6th was like this like scarring emotional event. Like, what are you talking about?
and
really the only
wasn't.
person who was killed, sadly, was a pro-Trump protester who was like shot point blank and posed no threat at all. So it's just really sad. And it's the power of propaganda of like people that are just like CNN devotees that, they just get brainwashed by this ridiculousness.
I don't get it. Like, it doesn't feel good. Like sometimes I will turn on CNN to be like, all right, what are they up to? And I'm just like, it makes my skin crawl. Like, I don't know. I don't know if just like my bullshit meter is more sensitive now, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Was there ever a time or a moment where you realized like, oh, I can't be part of this like DC machine. I have to go my own way?
Yeah, I was like thinking about maybe joining if Trump won term 2. I had some like offers to kind of like, move back into the national security space and join like his national security team. So I was like entertaining that. And then when like Biden secured, I guess, the election, whatever your opinion on that
so
is.
clever. Yeah.
When he secured the White House. Yeah, then I was like, yeah, I should probably, and DC was like super locked down to the point where it was weird because I have a lot of friends in DC, but they didn't really do anything for a long time. And some of them are like finally coming out after a year and a half of just like hibernating and watching Netflix and working from home. But I was like, I kind of want to do things. So I traveled a little bit throughout the country and spent a lot of time in Florida. And
Florida's great. Everyone likes to rip on Florida man and Florida people, but yeah, I've been there, God, at least once in this year. And I think I went for Thanksgiving, maybe last year. But yeah, it's like it's pretty much paradise, and people are chill. And I don't people. A lot of folks were worried, like, oh, there's all these New Yorkers that are moving here, and they're gonna bring their shitty voting with them. But I think it's okay so far. Like DeSantis seems to be crushing it. So
Yeah, it was interesting to see, especially when like tourists came down to Florida. You could kind of tell them because like they're the only people in the masks and stuff. And then it's interesting to see people like get like deprogrammed by like going to a bar in Florida with you because they're like, wait a second, like I'm not gonna like die from COVID. Like, no one really cares. So and then they like go home back to like, their California or New York, and they're like, why is everyone doing this? Don't they know that like this is just like not some kind of like people dropping dead in the streets type pandemic? And unfortunately, not enough people have experienced, freedom over the past year and are still under the impression that like, everything needs to be part of this like crazy safety regime. And I was in like a clothing store the other day in Jersey, and they're still like wiping down counters and stuff like that.
Oh my God. I'm like, have you not received new information in the last year? I'm like, this, like, were you sick that day when they were talking about like no surface transfer? But I don't know. That's crazy. Okay. I want to talk about crypto because I feel like, to me, it seems like one day you'll be like, oh, you'll hear, oh, it's the best thing ever. And then the other day you're like, oh no, it's a scam. Like, oh, like Elon Musk was trying to, prop up Dogecoin just so it could crash. And he's controlled government opposition or whatever. And so I'm like, are they trying to make us as confused as possible on crypto?
So crypto is a wide-ranging term about a lot of I like to focus on Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is like one of the most important inventions of our time. It's like the hardest money in human history, basically. And there are a lot of, this like crypto industry is, I think, a lot of individuals that are just kind of like riding Bitcoin's coattails. And there's massive amounts of like scamming and corruption. And while Bitcoin is terrific, like all these people in this like blockchain crypto industry, there's just like so many scammers out there. So that's why like when people ask me about, like what crypto should I buy? And it's like buy Bitcoin and just like leave it alone and it'll appreciate against the dollar, I think, amazingly, because there's been so much money printing going on the past couple of years. And I think that the government and the Fed has like trapped themselves in this like quantitative easing death spiral where you can't, like, once you turn on that money printer, it's very difficult to turn it off. So I think they're just going to continue printing trillions and trillions of dollars. And Bitcoin has, grown on average since its inception, like 200% per year. So like, and there's like no reason to believe that it's not going to continue to accumulate market share because, again, it's like such an important invention. You can send $1 million in Bitcoin from here to New Zealand for like the cost of $1 with no intermediaries, no sensors. Like, I think that's just an amazing technology, and it's super important for our time, where you have like these even like so-called Western democracies, like they hate the idea of not being able to control the money. And I think it's so important to have like this independent money that is like very much, entirely based on markets. And I think it's awesome. So that's why I'm such a big advocate. It goes along with, free thought, independence, and, having the government not control the money, I think will, advance human flourishing so much. And that's why it's so important.
So its value is based on how many people buy it. Sorry if I sound retarded, but
it's Bitcoin is totally based on market forces. So, if you're buying it at a certain price, and now there's like, I think there's 150 million people who own Bitcoin now. So it's growing well. And although there's like, crazy, like a lot of people say that, Bitcoin's not good because there's so much volatility, but this is a currency that was, only invented in 2009 and only really started to become popular maybe like half a decade ago. So wow. You'll see like a lot of volatility, but like there's been so much upside, like the price of Bitcoin hit $60,000 per Bitcoin a couple months ago, and yeah, it's like down 50% from there, but it's also, still, if you look at the long-term chart, it's grown tremendously and still has so much room for upside because this is such an important technology that is needed for human civilization. And, when people ask me like, oh, why should I invest in Bitcoin? The dollar, we have the US military and all this stuff. And yeah, like, I think the dollar is going to be around for a long time, but like the dollar is still depreciating in value, and the dollar is still controlled by, corrupt feds, the Federal Reserve, whoever's in charge of the Biden administration, like Congress members, like, Ilhan Omar, AOC. So like, you want your Ilhan Omar dollars, or would you rather have something that's independent of our government? And that's why, like, I think it's so important for people, especially because, like, if we enter some kind of like recession, to have their assets a little spread out and more protected. And Bitcoin is like such an awesome choice. These other cryptos, the problem is that they were like all created and like pre-mined by individuals who will like take like 20, 30, 40%. And then they're
pre-mined
like, okay.
Means you already take shares of it. Like I always hear people talking about mining and I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So most of like these other cryptocurrencies are just like released onto the market, and there's like no, like Bitcoin has a mining process. Like, you have to invest energy resources to mine Bitcoin, which also gives it value, even though like people hate it because they say it's bad for the environment. I don't think that's necessarily true. But these other cryptos, largely, even if you look at like some of the big ones, like, Ethereum's very popular, all this stuff was like pre-mined. And there's a reason why the people who founded these cryptos became billionaires, is because they said, okay, like, here's my supposedly awesome technology. And oh, by the way, like, I own 20% of all the coins. And so they're like, all right, great. Like, I'm just going to shill this stuff. Like, even if it's garbage, they're just going to shill it because, it'll get them rich. So that's
it's basically like Randy coin. It's like it's just about them,
But like, so if they can create a market demand for it, they can get insanely rich. So that's why it's, you really have to watch out for these things. And that's what makes Bitcoin so unique, is that like, it was not only the first, and it not only has, I think, the best, it's not only like the safest asset, like unhackable if you store it correctly, that it's also, just very much like an open market. There's no people that, like, when Bitcoin was created, were given like, 1 million Bitcoins or anything like that. Like, you either decided to mine Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin, but yeah, that's really what makes it so great.
Because there's no one person that owns like 20% of it, or at the start, at least.
So the first person, the pseudonymous founder of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever this person is, owns like 1 million Bitcoin, but he or she or they, the group of people that invented Bitcoin, has never spent their Bitcoin because it's available in a public ledger. So they actually, mined the Bitcoin too, using the mining process to get it going. So they didn't even, there was no like pre-mine situation with Bitcoin. I think that's why it's so great.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I had somebody, like a friend was like, you got to buy a whole Ethereum. And it really just depends on like who is like, what of your friends is most convincing. I'll be like, oh, okay. But it's like a lot of money to kind of chuck at something. And so I'm just thinking about like, okay, like, so the government keeps printing more money, what, to cover all the spending, right? But what's the alternative?
The alternative is to have like some form of sound money backed by something. And right now it's just backed by nothing. They just turn the money printer on, increase the debt, and, pay for all these things. But I think it's going to catch up eventually. And you kind of see the devaluing of the dollar, especially compared to Bitcoin, but also in terms of like pricing is going up. And there's all these other markets, there's like famously the college tuition market, like my future kids are going to be like, I'm going to spend $150,000 a year minimum on college.
Oh,
And you have
God.
all these other industries that are popping up. Like, there's just a lot of expensive stuff right now. And I think it's just going to continue to get more expensive as our currency gets devalued. If you're printing trillions of dollars, you're going to have a lot of millionaires. And then, what does it mean to become a millionaire? In a few years, it might mean like the equivalent of like, owning $100,000. So I think that like, that's just the reality of things. You're just going to see prices go up. Money's not going to be as valuable. And the only thing that's really protecting it is kind of like our war machine, because if you try to get off the dollar, you're going to get like invaded basically. So it'll be it's interesting times that we're living in.
Ooh. Oh, okay. Question in the chat. Oh, do you think banks will vanish altogether eventually?
Yeah, because, well, I think that there's a lot of these institutions that are popping up that are basically becoming banks. I don't think banks are going to be as powerful. Like, I don't think like these like Wells Fargo's, Chase, they're going to continue to lose market share, in my opinion, because like anyone's a bank. Robinhood's a bank now.
Hmm.
All of
Right.
your like,
PayPal.
yeah,
Yeah.
like all these stock trading platforms have become banks. And with like Bitcoin, you're basically your own bank. Basically, like you have your own savings account in that way. In the traditional financial system, I think it's still important to be part of a bank, but in the future, I don't see it being necessary at all. But it's interesting to see what's going to happen. Like there's going to be pushback by these institutions. They're not just going to roll over. So
Hmm.
again, it's going to come back to this like fight of like authoritarianism versus freedom. And hopefully our side wins, because if it doesn't win, then we'll live, very similar to this like China style social credit score system. So, yeah,
Oh, it's so scary.
we live in
Right.
an
Because you
interesting
can't,
time.
you can't get like a Bitcoin mortgage if you wanted to buy a house, right? That's why you
Yeah,
still, yeah.
no, there like are so many institutions popping up surrounding Bitcoin. There's a lot of like lending institutions. Like you can borrow against your Bitcoin, or you could borrow against your fiat currency to buy Bitcoin. So there's parallel. I think you'll see this popping up continually. There's a lot of institutions that are popping up to accommodate this new industry. So you will be able to like take out mortgages based on like Bitcoin loans and stuff like that.
Ooh, okay. We have a question. I wondered this too. What's a non-fungible token NFT and how do we make them? I don't think anyone can make an NFT, or am I wrong?
Yeah, basically anyone can make an NFT. An NFT is basically just like a man, like there's a lot of pro Ethereum people that aren't going to be happy with me, but I think an NFT is basically a screenshot that's saved on a public blockchain. I don't see the value of an NFT. I think it's like a total sucker game to say like,
Hmm.
oh, this thing has value because like I own it. It's one of one, but it's really like I could take a screenshot of a tweet that I sent and sell it as an NFT. Like that's
Oh
basically
man.
what an
Right.
NFT is. It's like internet art, or an internet token that's like supposedly limited in a sense, but you don't really like own anything other than a screenshot or like a video that anyone else can own. So I don't
Yeah,
see
what
it.
if your phone dies like permanently? Like where do
Yeah.
you then it's
Well,
gone, right?
it's there's a way to like, so I guess like if you're using like the blockchain, you can like restore it, and like so that's I guess the value of it is that it's stored on whatever blockchain of whatever like crypto scam you're using. So like people like the fact they're like, oh, you can see it on the blockchain that like it's like it has my digital signature. So I don't really see the value of it. There's people like Mark Cuban that are like obsessed with it, but I'm not really. I guess it's good if you're an artist and you need more, and you want to like create something on your computer and try to sell it. I guess it's like a good market for that, but I don't really see it as like some kind of like growing industry that's actually interesting and unique.
Yeah, I don't it's over my head and I'm like, I don't understand it either. Wait, that's not the one I was gonna click on. Okay, this one. Oh, what are your thoughts on the AMP crypto? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't really know what that is, but like again, like if people like dive too deep into crypto land, you're gonna get caught into like all these scams, and they have very good marketing teams because again, there's this huge incentive to try to like shill your shitcoin because
Hmm.
you're going to make a giant amount of money off of it. But in reality, I think Bitcoin serves the purpose as the ultimate cryptocurrency, and there is no, governing board or people that can like, manipulate the coin and make decisions about it that'll just like fundamentally overturn the supply, Bitcoin supply is capped at 21 million. And that's what makes it valuable as well. These other tokens, they're like, oh, we have like 1 billion and we can just like change the protocol and we're going to make it 2 billion because we just want to raise more money. So I really like, I think what's unique about Bitcoin is that it's not controlled by like, a governing body, like with a CEO and a CFO. And you can't really say that about any other, cryptocurrency right now.
Why did they decide the cap to be what it is, or how?
I think that their general thesis is that scarcity is important. So like, it's just when it's capped, there's just you're buying into something that has, scarcity is really important for monetary property, and for the dollar, they don't really believe that right now because they're printing trillions of them.
There's no scarcity there. Okay, looking for interesting questions. And then we have questions like, that's not even a question, a motorboat enthusiast. Randy. Bye, Randy Coin. Yeah, I had a guy that was like, I'm doing Brett Coin. And it's just, you can buy in, like he's a comedian. He's like, oh, and if I become more of a success, the value will go up. And I'm like, ugh. I was like, girl, come on.
Yeah, there's better ways to try to like, get rich than playing. I call it like shitcoin casino, basically. Like a lot of people are trying to like trade their way into this. Like basically, I think what these people are looking for when you're trying to like trade cryptos is you're looking for like a compelling marketing message, but like it's all bullshit. So that's why like it's just like you're basically going to the casino. You're just like you're playing roulette. That's the way I see it.
Are you somebody who believes like, okay, you should have some Bitcoin, some gold? Well, no, not so much on NFTs, but like, yeah, some in the regular bank, like spread yourself out as much as you can.
Yeah, like I'm not a financial advisor, but I love Bitcoin. I'm invested in Bitcoin, and I think that like in today's monetary environment, it's important to have dollars because it's very tough to just like live your life on a Bitcoin standard where you don't have access to so many markets and stuff like that. But I think eventually, like when people usually when they start to realize like how important Bitcoin is for humanity and its potential value, I think that's what gets people to like continue to move more and more of their net worth into Bitcoin. But again, it's very volatile, so you could really only invest in what you're prepared to lose. But there's so much upside to it too, so that's why it's I think for me it's a no-brainer for people to actually own no Bitcoin nowadays, in this crazy monetary environment. I think owning no Bitcoin is the real risk. Like a lot of people say Bitcoin is risky, but I think owning no Bitcoin is not a good position to be in right now.
And then it seems like, oh, well, I don't have, like if someone's like, I don't have a lot of money, they always say you have to invest money you're willing to just lose. And what if somebody's like, well, I don't want to lose any of my money? Like, do you think even just 5, 10, 20 bucks here and there is better than nothing?
Yeah, that's the thing is like, so like we live in this like such a weird economy where you have very few ways to actually like, save and grow your net worth in just like a regular fashion. You have like the stock market, but that's like what's so sad about today's economy. And I think a lot of people don't realize like there's a lot of middle income people who are just like progressively losing money because they're living close to paycheck, and they can't afford to just like put money in the stock market, take it out of the stock market, spend it on like goods and services. Like they don't really live in that flexible environment. So I think like putting aside a little bit for Bitcoin makes a lot more sense than like if you only have like, $20 a week instead of like throwing it into your savings account because it's like not going to appreciate at all. So I think it provides an important option for a lot of people. And especially like, in these, I don't want developing nations too, that don't really have opportunities, don't have access to the U.S. stock market. That's why it's like so important to get these people access to Bitcoin, because at least you have something else than like your crazy government's currency that they're like destroying their society with.
Wow. Yeah. This is an interesting question. Is there any connection between globalism and Bitcoin? I would say globalists probably hate Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I guess it depends how you identify a globalist. But yeah, like someone who believes in like a one world regime would hate Bitcoin because Bitcoin is freedom money. and they have no control over Bitcoin. A globalist would like want the UN to be involved, and even like these globalist institutions, what they're pushing is these like central bank digital currencies, which is basically like giving the government ability to put money and take money away from you through like a mobile application, and have the government completely in control of the currency, which I think is like a terrifying prospect. Because imagine like like people getting there's a lot of people getting deplatformed now,
Oh yeah.
from all these like social media giants. Imagine if like the government had the power to deplatform your money too, and they're like, okay, so you committed this crime, you were caught on
Oh
this camera in
God. Yeah.
Wyoming, and we're just gonna like suck money out of your bank account. Like I
Yeah.
think
You've been debanked.
yeah, that's what's going on in China too. Like in China, they're experimenting with these like temporary credits, like you have to spend it or lose it. So that eventually leads to a system where they're like, okay, so we're just gonna, if you're like not accommodating the ruling regime, we're just gonna take away your money, and like good luck living in our society. So that's like the alternative. That's like the utopian statist alternative to Bitcoin, and it's like a terrifying prospect. And that's like, I think what the globalist coin would be is them having the ability to control your assets entirely.
And then what's what the so you mentioned in China it's like, oh, like spend it or lose it. Is that like so they can control what you spend money on, or they just pressure you into
Yeah, so it's
not
more
holding
so
on to
just
it?
like control your behavior, and like they want to manipulate the economy, and they want to, especially like your political behavior. In China, if you're not a member of the Communist Party, they're like, oh, what's wrong with you? Like you don't agree with the ruling regime, and you become like an outcast in society. You can't get like a decent paying job, and sadly, our Fed has kind of flirted with this idea, and I think that there are a lot of statists in the United States who don't even, maybe they do realize it, but our system, especially during the COVID stuff, is very much inching closer to China's system. We might not look like the CCP's, Chinese Communist Party's one party structure right now, but for someone who is having spent a lot of time in Washington D.C., there is very much a uniparty system. It's just not, it's not really in name, but it's functioning that way. There's not much separation between Republicans and Democrats in Washington outside of the rhetoric and outside of their fundamental ideas for how they want to govern society. So that's why, like, I think there's definitely this creeping authoritarianism element, and you saw that with the COVID stuff that they all embraced.
Oh yeah, and somebody's in here. I've been bitching about Victoria's Secret for like the last few days because they're like, and I'm just using this because this is something like I guess as a chick I'm really noticing like all of these lingerie companies are like amoeba. They're like becoming less of what their individual brand was, and they're kind of like being this amoeba of like total diversity of all kinds of bodies and like, and I can't explain this without someone being like, oh, she's a racist, she's anti-inclusion. It's like, no, of course I'm about all that, but it's like, let's say I really liked Victoria's Secret old school brands. Like let's say I loved the angels, I loved the fashion shows, I loved all of it because it's like, yeah, I found those women to be like hotter than me. That makes me want to buy lingerie from them. But it's like, yeah, if I see a bunch of like overweight like chicks that don't look like me, I'm going to be less inclined to buy from them. And I feel like inclusivity is like leading towards brands losing their identity because there's this pressure to just be like everybody else.
Yeah, it's crazy. Megan Rapinoe is a great soccer player, but
yeah
you want your kids to be like Megan Rapinoe, but not in a model fashion. So
right, it's kind of hypocritical. It's like, oh, isn't
yeah.
she a strong like badass woman because she's an athlete, not because she's associated with a lingerie brand? And like, yes, I read somewhere that you're not going to be seeing her like in bras and panties and stuff. She'll just be like the face of it. But like, what's the point of like being the face of it if you're not? Let's see you in underwear then, Megan.
Maybe they want to like transition into a different type of company. I don't know what their game plan is, but like I don't think that anyone wants to that anyone would think that like that's a good strategy for selling lingerie. I don't really get what they're trying to do there besides like being like super woke, but I don't know if that will sell much. Like we'll see. We live in like such a weird economy with weird incentives, maybe it'll work out. Like, everyone thought that like, Nike was going to like go broke because they embraced Kaepernick. And then they're like, oh yeah, we just had our best quarter ever. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe there is a big market for like, woke social justice. And you see this like with all the companies that are like, changing their logos to celebrate Pride Month. Like there's definitely a market there.
Oh yeah.
They just what they don't tell you is that like, it's not really like, so the side that they want you to think is oppressed is not really oppressed because the entire corporate America is embracing it. So there's like a market there. So maybe it will work out for Victoria's Secret to just like go super woke and super like, eighth wave feminist or whatever we're on now and just like, try to sell product that way. It might work. Who knows?
Yeah, like don't gay guys are among like the crowd with the most disposable income? Like I haven't looked at anything recently, but I don't know. I think they're trying to appeal to like woke white folks, like, oh, they're inclusive. I'm going to buy from them, even though all they need to do is just like throw a rainbow on their logo and that's enough.
Yeah, it's like super cheap, but easy. And then they just like pretend like that, they're standing up for marginalized communities. But like the real marginalized communities are like people that are like just like political dissidents in America today that just like, even if they have like disgusting opinions, that like they'll just be like totally ostracized from American society. And I don't think that's really healthy. But like, yeah, corporate America is like super ridiculous and like ultra woke. And on the right, you don't really see much of a response to it other than like being like, all right, this is bullshit. We're mad and we're going to like protest your stupidity. And I guess that like works, but there seems to be like, I feel like there needs to be a better like strategy to push back against this. Cause like, there's still like, half the country is still right wingers. So like, how did we get into this system? I think what happens is like the right doesn't really, the right kind of just like expresses outrage and moves on. The left will just like boycott and burn down your business.
Yes.
So like they have like this riot veto that the right, I don't think that they should engage and entertain because it's like, uncivil, barbaric behavior to just like say like, F you, I'm burning down your business if you don't accommodate my demands. But there has to be like a better way. I'm not like a political savant.
Right.
It seems like, the right isn't being represented in the American culture at all. And they're just like losing every battle. So something has to.
They've just been scared into shutting up. They don't want to lose their cushy jobs. They don't want to be able to like not provide for their family. And I think their values are what keep them from getting destructive because they don't want to do that. But it's like they don't want to stoop to their level either. But it's like, is that what it's going to take? I hope not. I don't know. It's like, yeah, would there be able to make some sort of law like you can't get fired for having different political opinions but it's social. It's like it's kind of moved into like, yeah, but your friends will disown you, your family kind of disowns you, you're like censored from all this social media and you have no choice but to kind of like go underground with it, whatever that means.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties back into Bitcoin because Bitcoin is that in terms of like not being censored, that's like the best technology for that. And like, that's, a good way for people to kind of like fight back against the system too, is, you don't want to participate in this like woke corporatism that there needs to be more options for sure.
This is such a good comment from the chat. At some point, popular art and cultural trends became almost a closed system based on politics. Like, yeah, I feel like that really sums it up. It's like you can't sit at this table, if it was the cool kids table, which they would love to see themselves as. Well, thanks, chat. We jumped around on so many topics here. Jordan, I'm realizing as we talk, like, I'm like, okay, I need to have you back, but on my Rockfin channel, because then we can go like hog wild. Like you can say all the things that we're stifling ourselves on. Cause I'm trying not to get banned off YouTube, but that's no fun.
All it takes is like me to say one thing and then you're just like banned or you get demonetized. Like they're just so ridiculous. And I think that like they do this purposely. Like they wait for like one specific opening and then they just like, even if you have like 1,000 hours of content, they're like, you said this about the election.
Yep.
Oh my
God. Said this one thing. It's like January 6th. Like, oh, you have this one day that looks bad on paper. but anybody
And
who
by
was
the way,
there,
I'll structure this correctly so you don't get banned. But I think like it's a very important fundamental part of being an American to be allowed to question our democratic process. And that's why like it's so shocking to be like, what do you mean you can't question the election? Like, okay, first of all, the Democrats, for 4 years questioned Trump's legitimacy and said he was not legitimate
would
because
not
he was
shut
a
up
Russian,
about it. Yeah.
he was a Russian stooge. And I never like I thought that like they were like crazy conspiracy theorists, like with the whole like Putin owns Trump thing, like it's all like nonsense, and it was all just like a giant op to delegitimize the president. And I thought that was awful. But I would never say like, oh, you should be banned for saying this. Like, no, I thought that you're just like, these people are ridiculous conspiracy theorists and are purposely spreading disinformation to delegitimize the president and try to convince the country that he's illegitimate, so he has less power and less control and can enact his agenda. And I thought that was the reason why they're doing that. And I saw that, and I thought that like, the answer for that was more speech. But now we live in this environment where you're just being like the act of questioning this, which is an uncontestable right,
Just to have a
warrants
conversation.
censorship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. It's like right out of an what an authoritarian country would do, and their social media platforms. And although like those platforms might be owned by the government, these are just like woke oligarchs that have a very different form of censorship.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. Oh yeah, what was this other comment in the chat? Yeah, we were being lulled to sleep again. Everyone is afraid to speak up and gather because of Jan 6. Fear wins most battles. Yeah, I think people are just like, I don't want to lose my job. I got to hold it together for my family. But yeah, better organization for sure. Isn't it? I mean, I was going to say something really good, and then I was just listening because I'm trying to be more present. Oh, yeah. What I really want to look at and read more about and zoom out more on. And like Candace Owens had I think a story that she posted today about this. Where she was like, JK, happy Juneteenth. And then she was like, I think it's bullshit. What we really like when you look at like us, like America and Russia, and you look, if you zoom out and you'll be like, oh, okay, like if China wants to be number one, if they want to dominate the world, they've got to like basically fuck us up and they got to fuck up Russia. And it's interesting to see like if you keep looking up where the puppet strings connect. So I wanna look into that more. I feel like I need to look into more look into China.
Yeah, no, I think the powers that be would rather us just like fight about these like cultural issues.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, like, okay, whatever, like you're going to make something a federal holiday. Like, yeah, the like importance of that is important. For sure. And I'm not like discounting that conversation that people are having. But when that's like the entirety of the conversation and you're not talking about like the power structures in DC and throughout the United States and like who's in control and who's like just trying to like manipulate the conversation, and like, the rank corruption of the corporate press and our government right now. And instead you're like talking about the merits of making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Like you're kind of getting sucked into the game that they want you to play, which is like this divisive, racial environment where like everyone has to hate each other. And it's just like it's a little ridiculous that this is leading cable news now for like a week long. And it's just like it's like such like it just feels like so cheap that we're just like getting like sucked into like those conversations that like I don't think that anyone like actually talks about these things outside of politics. Like I think if you were to ask like
Right.
your neighbor in whatever part of America you live in, like I don't think that anyone's talking about Juneteenth. Like I think that that's just like a distraction completely.
No, like we all just started to see it on our Google calendars. We're like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this? A couple years ago. Nobody really cares. But it's like this perfect thing because it plays on your emotion. Because it's like if you're just like this super soft wokey and so inclusive, you're gonna be passionate about it. Or if you're an idiot who lives in victim mentality, you're gonna be obsessed with it. And if you're white, you can't say shit, and then the cycle just regenerates. So it's pretty brilliant. But yeah, there's a reason for everything. What any story, any trending topic, I'm like, all right, what's the real reason behind this? What are they showing us so that we don't look at something else? Like every trending news story, I'm like, this is a Chrissy Teigen apology. What other shit are they up to? I hate her.
Isn't it crazy what she got away with? Like that's
for years. She got unlimited free passes, like so many chances.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't, like I was reading about that story yesterday, last night, and I was like, holy shit, like she was like trying to tell people to kill them, like these like 14, 15-year-old teenage girls to kill themselves. Like, holy shit, this Hollywood is so crazy. Like it's amazing.
They're freaking out right now.
There.
I think they're just like, somebody tell us what to do to stay relevant and to stay profitable. They're brainless. Yeah, Jordan, for sure. I'm gonna have you back on my Rockfin channel. We're gonna go hog wild. We're gonna say all the things. But until then, where can people find you and follow you and keep up with your writings?
Yeah, so you can find me at dossier, dossier.substack.com. That's like my independent publication where I do all my best work on a bunch of topics, the COVID stuff, my background in foreign policy. Yeah, I write about Bitcoin and like the scam cryptos and stuff like that too. So that's kind of where I'm focusing most of my energies on nowadays. So you can follow me there. You can follow Twitter, just at my name. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this was great, Jordan. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.